Hi, welcome to my video on review number 3, polynomial functions. This is the review on videos numbers 30 to 35, and I broke it up into an extra review because of the length of the video. And as in all my reviews, you could treat it as a quiz, and it's marked at a 38. So you do each question, give yourself a score, total up the pages, total up each page on the bottom and add up the total and put it at a 38. So here we go. Let's do a review of the videos. Graph y equals x to the fourth plus 3x cubed minus 3x squared minus 11x minus 6. So you note that x to the fourth, so it has 4 roots, and it has if you make x to the fourth plus 3x cubed minus 3x squared minus 11x minus 6 equals 0, then what you're doing, you're letting y equals 0 and you're finding the x-intercepts. And when we find the x-intercepts, we will check to see the possible roots. So the possible roots are all the factors of 6. So the possible roots are plus or minus. Factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. So those are all the possible rational roots. Because this is p is negative 6 and q is 1. Because q is 1, dividing by 1 gives you all the factors of 6 plus minus are the possible rational roots. And we have a plus and a minus and imaginary roots and total. So if we look up here and do the sign change by Descartes' rule, no sign change, there's 1 here, no sign change, and there's no, so there's only 1 positive root. Okay, that means now we have to look at if it's going to be with a negative x. So if we take the negative x and put it in here, we'll put a negative x here to the 4th power, we'll get a positive. You put a negative x here and cube it, you get a negative. Positive times a negative is a negative. Put a negative x and square it, you get a positive x times negative is negative. We put a negative x here, negative times a negative is a positive, and we have a negative 6. So this is in terms of putting a negative x in. So the number of sign changes is 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 negatives. So if we have 1 positive and 3 negatives, there are 4 roots altogether, so we have no imaginaries. And if we also have, that's going to be a 3, so it's a 3 or a 1 negative. So if you got 1 negative and you got 1 positive, you could have 2 imaginaries with a total of 4 roots. So that means we have 1 positive root. So because the coefficients, okay, let's go through a pattern that I do. Notice in this equation, x, there's no GCF of x. But if you can't add up, the coefficients do not add up to give you 0, so 1 is not a root. So there's 1 positive, so we'll check for, if 1 is not a root, we'll check with the 2 by synthetic division. Descending order, correct, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we got a 1, 3, negative 3, negative 11, negative 6. Draw a line, bring down your 1, multiply, 2, add, 5, multiply, 10, add, 7, multiply, 14, add, 3, multiply, 6. So that means that 2 is a root of this equation, or 2 is the x-intercept of the graph. That means x minus 2 is a factor of this trinomial. Okay, now we have the positive root, so that means it's no good to check 3 and 6 because 2, there's only 1 positive root and that's 2. So now we'll check with the negative root. So let's try negative 1 to see if, and we work on the depressed equation of 1, 5, 7, 3. Remember, This is x to the 4, x cubed, x squared, x constant. So when we divide by x minus 2, this becomes a cubic. So this is x cubed, x squared, x constant. So draw a line, bring down your 1, multiply, negative 1, add 4, multiply, negative 4, add 3, multiply, negative 3, and we get a 0 remainder. So that means negative 1 is a root, so that means x plus 1 is a factor. Or negative 1 is a root of the equation, and negative 1 is also an x-intercept of this equation, of the graph. So now we have a depressed equation, x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So we have a quadratic, so we try to factor it. If we can factor it, x squared is x and x. Factors of 3 are 3 and 1, because the 3 is a product, the 4 is a sum. The product is positive, and the sum is positive, so it's a positive 3, positive 1. So x plus 3 is equal to 0, x is equal to negative 3. Or x plus 1 is equal to 0, x is equal to negative 1. Again, if you think about it, the equation can be written as y, and we got an x minus 2, and right here we got an x plus 1 is a factor. Right here we got an x plus 3, and right here we got an x plus 1. So notice that that equation has an x minus 2, x plus 1 squared, because there's 2 of them, times x plus 3. So we have all the equation done, perfect. Now we're going to let x, we're going to get the y-intercept. So we're going to let x equals 0 into this equation. So when I put 0 into this equation, that becomes a 0, that becomes a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0. So when I put 0 into the equation, right here, I don't have to plug it in. I can see that there's, and they all add up to negative 6. So when x is 0, y is negative 6. So that's the y-intercept. So here we go. We got a root or an intercept of 2. So there it is right there. We got a root or an intercept of negative 1. There it is right there. And we got a root of negative 3, which is right there. And we have a y-intercept of negative 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative, which is there. And because it's positive, this is the furthest x-intercept on the right. We're starting here and coming down. So remember, it has to go through here, here, and here. But at x minus 2, which is 2 intercept, it's a linear, degree 1, so it goes on through, and it comes on down, goes on down, it goes down below, and then it comes up to the y-intercept of 6. It has to come up, and notice at x plus 1, which is a minus 1, is a square, so that means it's going to bounce off, or it's going to be tangent. And then it turns, and it comes down again, and I'm not concerned how far I go down, but I do have to turn now to go up through here, because at x plus 3 there's a 1, so it's going to go on through. So it turns, comes back up, and that's a negative 6 y-intercept. So there's the graph of this equation, which is the quartic. And notice it has 3 x-intercept, but there's a double here. And you can give yourself some marks. So if you have all this figured out here, there's 1 mark. If you have negative 2 as a root, you can give yourself a mark. If you negative 1 is a root, you can give yourself a mark. If you've worked out these 2 roots with the intercepts, there's 2 more marks, is 5. And you have 2, if you figured out the graph, which is 2, and there's 1 more somewhere. Oh, you figured out the y-intercept. So 8 marks in total altogether. So if you get the question right, you get 8 marks. Solve algebraically. So we got a cubic equation and a linear. y equals mx plus b. So to solve this linear equation, we let both sides are equal to y, so we go x cubed minus x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 2x plus 4. Because they're both equal to y, we let them equal to each other. So we'll move all terms to the left side. So the 4's cancel out because they're the same. And so we get x cubed minus x squared minus 4x. So the 2 comes over. Then 2x comes over to become negative 2x equals 0. So x cubed minus x squared minus 6x equals 0, like terms. And notice we're solving, so I see x is a GCF, so I take the x out. So x cubed divided by x is x squared divided by x is negative x. Negative 6x divided by x is negative 6. And we have x is equal to 0. And we can see if this is, we have x squared minus x minus 6 equal to 0. Again, we got a quadratic. Factors of 6 are 3 and 2. Looks like the 3 and 2 will give me a negative 1. So x squared is x and x. Factors of 6 are 6 and 1. Product is negative 6. 6 and 1, 3 and 2. 3 and 2 will give me a 1. The product is negative and the sum is negative, so it must be negative 3 plus 2. So x, make that an x, minus 3 is equal to 0. Or x plus 2 is equal to 0. X is equal to 3. X is equal to negative 2. And x is equal to 0 here. Now, we have x is equal to 0. So I'm going to sub the 0 into either one of these two equations. So we call this equation 1, I call this equation 2. It's easier to sub x equals 0 into equation 2. So let's sub it into equation 2 because there's less variables. X is 0. 2 times 0 is 0 plus 4. We get a 4, so we get the point 0, 4. And we have another x value. X is equal to 3, so we sub that into equation 2 also. And x is 3. 6 plus 4 is 10, so we have the point x is 3, 10. And we also have x is negative 2. So let's go down here. X equals negative 2. And we sub that into equation 2, which is linear. So x is negative 2. Negative 2. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Plus 4 is 0. So that's the point of negative 2, comma 0. So these are the 3 points. 1, 2, 3. These 3 points make this system true. These 3 points will satisfy both equations. And we have 7 marks. So if you got to this equation here, you get a mark. If you solved it to here, you get 2, 3, 4 marks, 5, 6, 7 marks total. So that's how I assign the marks if I was marking it for a quiz. Okay, let's continue. Find the equation in factored form of the polynomial. P of x is a, x minus b times x minus c. And sometimes we could have a power depending on what we're given. So the p of negative 2 equals 0. So that means in the factored form, if you think about it, that means that if this is the p of a equals 0, the remainder is 0. So that means x plus 2 is a factor. If the p of 1 equals 0, that means x minus 1 is a factor. Because the p of 2 is a 0 at the polynomial, giving you a remainder 0. So these are factors. The p of 3 equals 0, so x minus 3 is equal to 0 as a factor. And so we have the p of x equals a times these binomials. Now we have the p of negative 1. So if we do the p of negative 1 and sub in negative 1 in the place of x and work it out, then Remember, the p of negative 1 is a remainder of 32. So I'm putting negative 1 in the place of x in each of these binomials. So I get a. So when I put a negative 1 here, I get a 1. Put a negative 1 right here in place of x, I get a negative 2. Put a negative 1 here, I get a negative 4. So the p, that's 1, negative, negative, that's an 8a. But we know that the p of negative 1 is 32. That means that 8a equals 32. And you divide by 8, cancel. 32 divided by 8 is 4. So a is 4. That means the p of x is equal to a, which is 4, times each of these factors. There it is. So that's the equation that represents, so if you put a negative 2 in here, this becomes 0. So you put a negative 2 in, you get a 0. You put a 1 in here, you will get a 0. If you put 3 in here, you'll get p of 3 is equal to 0. And if you put a negative 1 in this equation here, the p of negative 1, this works out to be a 32. And the marks are, if you wrote that, you get a mark. If you got 8a, you got a mark. If you got 4, you got a mark. And if you wrote down this equation, you got 2 more 5 altogether. And don't forget to pause the video. It's a review on the videos are done. These questions are done in order of the videos. So if you make a mistake, then go back and review the videos. 2x to the fourth plus 6x cubed plus 4x minus 1 equals 0. Find the sum of the roots. Well, the sum of the roots in the polynomial equation, the sum of the roots is negative b over a. So a is 2, b is 6, c is 4, and we could say d or k, d is negative 1. So the sum of the roots is a negative b, which is negative 6, all over 2. So the sum of the roots is negative 3. And the product of roots is even, so the product of the roots is k over a. If that was an odd root, then it would be negative k over a. So the k over a, in this case, it's d over a, because the product is the constant term on the end. So the product is d is negative 1, so it's a d is negative 1 over a, which is 2. So the product of roots is a negative 1/2. So if you wrote negative 3, you get 2 marks. If you got a negative 1/2, then you get 2 marks. And total up your page, and hopefully you have everything right. And let's continue. The cubic equation has a root of 3 plus I. The sum of the roots is 8. Find equation as ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. Okay, cubic equation, right? We have a cubic equation. So if a cubic equation has 3 roots, so if one of the roots is 3 plus I, because they're conjugates, then the other root is 3 minus I. And remember, there's 3 roots, so there's 2 of them. So there's another root that I'm going to call R for root. So the sum of the roots, so the sum of the roots is 8. So that means if you take these roots, R, add on 3 plus I, add on 3 minus I, the sum of these roots is going to be 8. And notice the i's cancel out because 1 is plus 1 is minus. So R plus 6 is equal to 8. R is equal to 8 minus 6. R is 2. So we got 3 plus I, 3 minus I, and 2 as the roots. So the sum of the roots is negative b over a. So that means the sum of the roots is 8. So notice that the sum of the roots is equal to 8. So that means negative b over a is equal to 8 over 1. Negative b is equal to 8. Divide by negative 1. And we get b is equal to negative 8. And as a result, a is 1. So now we got a is 1. We got b is negative 8. So now we have to go and see if we can get the d. D is the product. Well, since we have the roots are 2 and 3 plus I and 3 minus I have all three. So let's go product is the product of these. So it's 2. So I'm going to multiply this out. So 3 times 3 is 9. Outside is negative 3i. Inside is 3i. So that cancels out. So we get negative I squared. But a negative I squared is negative 1. So that becomes 1. So that's 9 plus 1. So 9 plus 1 is 10. So the product of the roots is 10. But the product of the roots, notice this is odd, or cubic. The product of the roots is a negative k over a. That means that a negative k over a is equal to the product 20 over 1. Negative k is equal to 20. Divide by negative 1, k is equal to negative 20. And a is 1. So we have k. Again, k is d. So just to make that clear, that's the d in this equation, because k is the constant term. So that's the d. That's in the equation. I put down k all the time, but in this case I have a d here. So the d is the k. That's the d. That's d. d is the constant term on the end. So d is now, so we have a is 1. We got x cubed. B is negative 8. We don't know C, but we do have D is negative 20 equals 0. The only letter we don't have for this equation is C. But we know that one of the roots is 2. So if R is 2, subbing 2 in makes the equation equal to 0 because 2 is a root. Then subbing 2 in for x will make the equation equal to 0 because the remainder is 0. So that's 8. 4 times negative 8 is negative 32 plus 2c minus 20 equals 0. So we have 2c minus 44 equals 0. So negative 20, negative 52, take away 8 is negative 44. 2c equals 44. And divide by 2, c is equal to 22. So now we have all the letters. So a is 1, so it's x cubed minus 8x squared. C is 22 minus 20. So that's the equation that has these roots of 2, 3 plus I, 3 minus I. And there's 8 marks here. So if you wrote this root down, you got a mark. If you solved it and got the other root as 2 by having a sum, you got a mark. If you figured out that you have b is negative 8 and a is 1, you got another mark. If you figured out your product is 20, then you got another mark and worked out the negative 20. And if you wrote this equation, subbed all them in, you got another mark. And if you solved it out and got 22, you got another mark. And if you wrote it down as this equation, you got another mark. So 8 marks if I put them all together there. So I wrote down the final equation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's another mark that I put there somewhere. Oh yes, I give a mark for working out to 20, and I give a mark for working out negative 20. 8 marks altogether. Okay, hopefully everything is going okay. And the final question. Negative 2 is the root of this cubic equation. It says find two equations. Well, we only have one here. How can we find two? Well, we notice the k squared is a quadratic. Probably we'll get two values of k to get the two equations. So if negative 2 is a root, doing synthetic division on descending order of 3, 2, 1, that's a constant. We got 1, and we got, if we do 2k, and we do 20, and we do k squared, like that, then we do synthetic division. Another way to I can do synthetic division there, but it might get a bit of cumbersome. If you put a negative 2 in, like this, as the p of negative 2, so x is negative 2. So I subbed in negative 2, so when I do the p of negative 2, I get a remainder of 0. So in this case, it might be easier to sub the negative 2 in the place of x here, here, and here, and work this out for k. So I get a negative 8. That's 4 times 2 is 8k. That's negative 40 plus k squared. And k squared plus 8k. Negative 8, negative 40 is negative 48. And notice I have a k squared, so it's same as if I'm going to factoring in terms of k. So it's a k times a k. The factors of 48 to give me an 8. 48 is 1 times 48, 2 times 24, and 4 times 12, and 6 times 6. What factors of 48 is going to give me an 8? Well, there they are. It's 12 and 4. And what happens? The product is negative, so I have to multiply, so it has to be positive 12, negative 4, negative 12, positive 4. When you add, you get a positive 8. So if you had positive 12, negative 4, multiply, negative 48, add, plus 8. So k plus 12 is equal to 0, or k minus 4 is equal to 0. So k is equal to negative 12, and k is equal to 4. So what happens if we take k is equal to negative 12 and sub it into the equation? Then we should get an equation. So there's two different values of k, sub each one in. So I'm putting k in to be negative 12. K is negative 12. So I got the sub in the place of k. So there it is. So when I do that, that's a negative 24x squared plus 20x plus 144. So that's one equation when k is negative 12. Now, what about when we get another value of k? K is 4. So I'm going to sub 4 in for k. So 2 times k is 2 times 4x squared plus 20x, there's your plus k squared is 4 squared. So that's x. Did I say x? Notice right here I wrote x to the 4. That's x cubed. Gotta be careful. That's x cubed plus 8x squared plus 20x plus 16 equals 0. So these are the two equations that will have a root of negative 2. So if you did synthetic division by negative 2 on this, you get a remainder of 0. If you did synthetic division on this equation, then you get a remainder of 0. Or if you subbed in negative 2 in the place of x and work it out, you get a 0 on this side. If you sub the negative 2 in here, then you get 0. And so there's 6 marks. So where did I assign the marks? So if you sub them in, you got a mark. If you worked out the equation to here, you got a mark. If you worked out the two values, you got 2 more marks. If you did each equation, you got a mark each, so 6 altogether. And total of each of your pages at the bottom, and go back to the first page, and you had out of 38, so put your total over 38, divide 38 into the numerator, get a decimal, move your decimal 2 places to the right. And that completes the review of videos 30 to 35. So, thank you for viewing my video, and I hope the video helped you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.